Welcome to this week's edition of Red and Black Sport. People say to me, Pete, why do you still do the program? Well, I'll tell you why, because I get the chance now and again to meet some real iconic New Zealanders. And a gentleman who's flown down to Auckland to be with us is a real pleasure to have. He's got a book out, so there's a reason to be here as well. He's here to make a quid. Have a look at the book. It's absolutely fantastic. There it is there, A Lifetime in Sport. And he's had a lifetime in sport. Not just, though, in sport, he's also achieved at sport. And it's a pleasure to welcome Roy Williams. Happy birthday for last Tuesday, Roy, 80.
Don't tell them that.
No, you look really good, mate. You
Thank
really
you very
do.
much.
Yeah.
It's great to catch up with you again after all these years.
It is. It's a long time ago. But can we just go right back to the beginning? And some of you out there may not actually get the link just yet, but we'll fill you in. Probably not a surprise that sport featured in your life. And I'm going to talk about your sister, who's older than you were. Was she one of the catalysts to get you into sport?
Really, she was, because when she won the Olympic Games gold medal...
This is Yvette Williams we're talking about.
Yeah, in Helsinki in 1952, and she was the first woman to win the Olympic gold medal, first New Zealand woman. And it was 40 years before the next New Zealand woman won. Barbara Kendall was the next New Zealand woman to win an Olympic gold medal. 40 years went by. So
sport was in the household?
It was, but strangely, neither of our parents played sport.
Really?
Yeah. Dad was an Australian, dare I say it.
Oh.
Dare I say it. And he was 17 when the First World War broke out. Well, he was 16 actually, and he volunteered when he was 17, and he was fighting in the trenches in northern France and up in Belgium, Passchendaele, all the great battles. And he
survived.
He was wounded and gassed, but and he suffered quite a lot.
What got him to New Zealand?
Well, it was interesting because he came back from a war, and he was wounded and gassed, and they were promised work in Australia if they volunteered for the First World War. And of course he volunteered, and when they came back there was no work. So he had all his army pay saved up, which he sent to his mother. So he decided to try his luck in New Zealand, just as a bit of a flyer. He had enough money to get a troop ship, an ordinary passenger ship across, and that's where he met his mother. Now, my mother came from Dunedin, and she was a New Zealand Highland dancing champion. But
you don't class that as a sport?
Well, it's pretty, I guess it's pretty physical.
Yeah.
And she was well known around New Zealand having great spring or elevation or whatever. And but she had then, after she had given up in her late teens, the Highland dancing, she became a professional dancer. And she was with the J.C. Williamson vaudeville show that toured Australia and New Zealand, and she just toured Australia and is coming back to Dunedin on the ship. And that's where Dad met up with Mum.
Is that right? Yvette, she's 5 years older than you are.
Yes.
So you were old enough to enjoy her success.
Yes.
Very, very proud moment for you.
Oh, certainly was, yes.
Yeah. And she went on, didn't she, as a truly great athlete?
Yes, because she not only won in Helsinki in 1952, but she broke the world, Franny Brannickiscone's world long jump record in Gisborne, of all places, in 1954. And when she went to the Commonwealth Games in Vancouver in 1954, she won 3 Commonwealth Games gold medals, which went with a gold medal she won in Auckland in 1950.
So our most decorated female athlete, wasn't she?
Pretty much
far.
so. Yes,
I would have thought.
And they said, the experts at that time said she was the greatest all-round track and field athlete in the world for the period from 1953 to 1954.
So the 3 golds at the Commonwealth were long jump?
Oh, she won the first one in long jump with the Games record in Eden Park, of all places, in 1950, when the Games were in Auckland. And then in 1954, she won the long jump, shot and discus. Nice. And coincidentally, the long jump and discus were held at the same time.
Really?
Because Duke of Edinburgh was supposed to arrive, and he was an hour late as he got caught in the traffic or some such thing, so that one of the 2 of those events was put back an hour.
Gave her the chance.
That's right, and Yvette had to compete in those 2 events, which were on opposite sides of the track, and she had to change her shoes 12 times because you had flat shoes in the concrete discus circle.
We've got to talk about my guest though, Roy Williams. I think the hardest sport I believe that you could possibly compete in is a decathlon. The most demanding physically, I would have thought. You won a gold in the Commonwealth Games in the decathlon. Why on earth did you take that up? Just because you were good at everything?
Yeah, I was not good enough at anything in particular to make it at international level. I was never fast enough to make it as a sprinter. I could run about 10.9 for the 100 metres at best, so I was never going to cut the ice as a sprinter. I was never big enough as a thrower to match Les Mills and Robin Tate and co. Although I did win my first New Zealand title in the discus at Lancaster Park in 1956, so I've got a very strong Canterbury connection.
Yeah.
But I was never good enough, but I'd trained with Yvette and under her coach Jim Bellwood in Dunedin for about 4 years with a big group of us. And
Was that the Caledonian ground or where were you?
No, it was out, on Sundays we used to go down to back at Forbury Park Racecourse, Kettle Park.
Yes.
And we'd run from St Clair right along past St Kilda to Lawyer's Head along the beach to warm up, along the Chisholm Park Golf Course, back along the
Was
sand
he a bit
hills.
of a Lydiard, your coach?
Oh, well, he is a tough man. Yeah. So it'd be a 30-minute warm-up.
Yeah.
And then we'd, for the next 2 hours, we'd practice the skills of various
But how
events.
do you keep focused in a decathlon? It's over 2 days. It's a massive event,
It's
isn't
not
it?
easy.
No.
I've always said it's as much a mental test as a physical test. You've got to obviously be very, very well conditioned to keep coming back. But around about the last 3 events were my worst events, and to concentrate and to just have
Because
that
you'd be
mental toughness.
absolutely flogged, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and in Jamaica, we started at 9 o'clock the first day, 9 o'clock the first day, and didn't finish till 7 o'clock at night. So we were out in the sun and it was 30 degree plus, having come from a cold midwinter, Auckland or New Zealand, and humidity was about 90%. Because it's right, Kingston, Jamaica is right on the equator. So
And was your second day the same?
Second day was even worse. We started at 9 o'clock in the morning
Godfathers.
and didn't finish the run. Started at 1,500 metres, the final event, at 7 minutes to midnight. But I did take 2 hours off. Interestingly, I went back to the Games Village for a bit of lunch between the
Quite
second and third
gentlemanly.
events.
Yeah.
And I pulled the shelves out of the refrigerator in the athletes' quarters and sat in the fridge for an hour. I had the door open, mind you.
That's 66, but let's go back to 64, because it's in the book. It's very interesting. You missed selection. Why?
I still don't know. My late wife and I, we'd gone to Europe for four months doing the big OE, and we travelled through about 12 or 14 countries in a little Volkswagen, slept in the car half the time because we were too late for accommodation or couldn't afford it. Then we met up with Les and Colleen Mills and his family in New York, travelled 6 weeks right across the States and ended up in Los Angeles, where Les and I studied at the University of Southern California. And I worked out it probably cost my late wife and I about $20,000 this whole
In those
experience.
days, yeah.
And it was mainly aimed at making a Commonwealth, the
Olympics.
New Zealand team for the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah. You have a man in mind, though, when you say you have no idea. He was a much revered man, but in the book it's not quite as clear as that. Sir Lance Cross. How did you make him cross?
Well, I better be careful about this because his ghost might come back to haunt me. But I still don't know, because I played basketball for New
Well,
Zealand.
we're going to get onto that in a minute. Yeah,
I played basketball for New Zealand, and Lance Cross was the president and chairman of the New Zealand Basketball Association. And he's also one of the 3, I don't know whether he's convener or he's one of the 3 Olympic selectors in 1964.
Was your form good enough?
Yeah, I was ranked in the top 8 to 10 in the world. And
he never explained it to you?
well, Harold Osted was really the one, because he was chairman of both the New Zealand Athletic Association and New Zealand Olympic Commonwealth Games Association at the time. And when I missed out, he wrote me this real greasy letter from Tokyo. He managed to get himself a trip to Tokyo, and arrived in Los Angeles, where we had an apartment. And he said, Roy said, I'm so sorry you missed out on the team, but it was something out of my control. And he said, I've always respected you and admire you as an athlete, and I just hope it's not too big a setback to...
Did you flush it down the dunny?
Greasy. No, I've still got it home, actually. I've referred to it in the book.
I know it's there, mate.
I felt like it.
Yeah, we've got to just take a breather, because we've got to pay the bills. But the book is available. It's a hell of a good read, because there's so much else in his life. We're not going to have time to get through it in one program. But anyway, Roy Williams is my guest. Back shortly. One of the best bits of the book, and I know Roy won't like me referring to it, is actually his CV in the back. It's very, very impressive, I've got to tell you. Represented New Zealand at basketball for a long period of time, 57 to 62, I think, and still combined, of course, with his athletics. But anyway, he wins the Supreme Award, as we call it now, in the Halberg Awards, 1966, New Zealand Sports of the Year. Is that the greatest, apart from a gold medal, is that the greatest accolade that your peers can actually vote that for you?
I think so, Pete.
Yeah.
Now, I felt very sorry for Val Young, because I still believe that Val was as much deserving, if not more deserving than I was. She won 2 gold medals, and she'd won maybe 3 gold medals in 58 and 62.
Long tenure, didn't she?
Oh, sure. And she was world class, no question about it. And she was very, very unlucky not to win a medal at the Olympics on 2 or 3 occasions, 1956.
I've got to say, though, Roy, I don't think there's ever been a Halberg Awards where it hasn't had controversy and people arguing about who should have won what. You got it in '66 and a huge thrill.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Sports
it opened
Hall
a lot
of
of
Fame.
doors for me as well.
Sports Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Yeah. Real legend from
I
that point
guess,
of view.
yeah. But as I say, there's certainly 2 or 3 other candidates who were equally deserving. And I felt sorry for Val in particular.
One thing about writing a book, and I've not yet done it, people have asked me to do it, and I will do it once. When you sit down to do it, do you suddenly realise just how much you've packed into your life when you start to put it in print?
Oh, for sure, because it has been a remarkable life. Not remarkable in context of what I achieved, but remarkable all of...
Where it took you.
Yeah, that's right. All around the world and...
in various areas too, which was great.
It was a very interesting story, if I can allude to it.
Yeah. Don't give the book away, though.
No, this is just... I don't think it's even in the book. It might be. But in 1953 or 54, I was at Dunedin Teachers Training College, and I came to Christchurch to play rugby, I think, and basketball against Christchurch Teachers Training College. And we stayed at the Addington camping ground. We had a hut there for about, 10 bob a night or something. In 1960, when I started at the Auckland Star in 1965 or 66, I think it was, I was sent, my first assignment was to Christchurch. And I caught the plane down here, and I thought, where am I going to stay?
What was the occasion here?
I can't
Lions
remember. I don't know, there might have been one of the athletic meetings or something.
Wasn't rugby?
No, because I didn't start doing the rugby until 1970, through to 1990.
Okay, so you come down here and flash accommodation again for you?
Well, no, because I thought, where am I going to stay? So I caught a taxi to the Addington camping ground. And I booked in a hut at the Addington camping ground for, I don't know, a couple of dollars a night or something. And I had fish and chips the first night and chicken chow mein the second night. And I got back to the Auckland Star, and of course I produced the receipts, and the expenses went up to the accountant. And then I had to come down to the sports editor, Jeff Black, and he got after about 2 days after the accountants had ticked it off, and he called me to the desk. He said, "Hey Roy," he said, "I want to see you." He said, "What's this about 10 bob a night at this Addington camping ground? And what did you eat down there?" I said, "A fish and chips the first night and chicken chow mein." He said, "What the hell's going on?" He said, I said, "That's the way I lived. My wife and I travelled around Europe, and we slept in the car and eat crap food." And he said, "Well, look."
But you buggered everyone else up, didn't you?
He said, "From now on," he said, "you've got to go upstairs to the 4th floor and do all your bookings through the women up there, because if you don't, the accountants will have all our bloody sports reporters staying at camping grounds and eating." Was
journalism somewhere you thought you would go?
Not really, no. Right. Although I'd played around with it a little bit. By just chance at the University of Southern California, I'd taken a short course in sports writing. Right. Just to fill in a couple of hours once a week. So I had that behind me. And when I worked at the YMCA as a physical instructor for 3 or 4 years.
Whereabouts?
Up in Auckland.
In Auckland.
Auckland YMCA when it opened up there. And I had the dubious title of locker room attendant when I started there, looking after everybody's dirty old clothes and keeping their money inside. And between times, I had a lot of spare time. But I used to put out a little, they called it Pixie Pages for some reason, and I used to sell it for 6pence to the athletes. And I'd go to the library and look at all the results from different athletic meetings and do little interviews with like Elias Mills, Murray Halberg, their training. And I used to sell it to the athletes for 6pence once a month. And I donated all what little profit was back to the Auckland Athletics Centre. So I had a little bit of a background. And when I was in Dunedin at Teachers Training College, I was making a bit of money on the side with the Otago Daily Times. Dad had a shortwave radio, and I used to listen to the BBC shortwave radio program on a Sunday night. And we had a few, Ronnie Moore was racing over there in Speedway, and a guy called Ron Johnson, Otago, and they were doing very well on the world circuit. So I'd write down and send it into Teddy Isaacs, the sports editor of the Otago Daily Times, and they'd run a sports brief column on every Tuesday. And you got paid for it? 2 and 6pence.
Good on you. Brief. Yeah. Very hard to get money out of them now, I can tell you, because they own CTV. But I digress. Yeah. Did you ever go teaching?
I did, yes. I taught for a year in Dunedin.
In Dunedin.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was on a radio program up in Auckland a couple of weeks ago, and some guy rang in. He said, "It's Rob Bremner here, Roy." He said, "You won't remember me, but you taught me
Really?
When I was at Concord School in Dunedin, the year I taught in Dunedin.
Yeah. Okay, so you had it got you around the world, didn't it? The athletic side.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Did you tour at all with the basketball?
I toured Asia with the first
yes.
major New Zealand team to tour overseas.
How was that experience?
Oh, it's great because I had the opportunity of trying out for the 1962 Empire and Commonwealth Games in Perth, or go on the basketball tour, but they're pretty much at the same time. I couldn't do both,
right.
And it was a more attractive tour because we had 4 games in Australia. Then we went to Singapore, Malaysia.
Whole new world for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Thailand, we played 3 games in Bangkok.
You stayed in an army hut?
No, it was a bit more upmarket. And then we went to the Philippines, played 3 games in the Philippines, and we played all their national teams, of course. And then
so did it ever become a choice for you? Do I go with athletics or go with basketball?
Well, athletics was always my first choice.
Yeah, right.
And but I played basketball. You could never do it today in today's
that's what I'm thinking.
environment.
Yeah.
I played
Were you still playing a bit of rugby?
I played right up to 18. I played for 10 years, and I represented Otago at primary, intermediate school level against Southland a couple of games. And but what changed, of course, I wanted to be an All Black like most kids.
Absolutely.
And I had a fair amount of ability because I was quick and, obviously.
So what happened?
Reasonably strong. Well, I went out to the Pirates Club, which is just 5 minutes from where we lived in Dunedin, for a pre-season trial game. I thought I'd try out under 18s or under 20s or what it was, and I got late tackled and I broke my arm and broke a bone in my wrist and broke the main radius bone in my arm. And my
so was that the end of it?
Arm was in plaster for 8 weeks.
Right, got to go to a break. The book is out. It's a great, because we haven't even covered a quarter of it at this stage. We'll try and rattle through it when we come back after the break. The book is out, Sports Crazy, and it's a lifetime in Kiwi sport. Roy Williams, the author, is with us, and we haven't got time to get through it all. We're going to have to scamper, but that's the beauty, you see. You've got to buy the book. It's available at all good bookstores, and we've got a signed copy we're going to give away as well. All you have to do is ring Mary Ann on 377033, 377033, register, and we'll do the draw next week. So there we are. 1 copy only, and it's signed by Roy. Roy, let's scamper on through. 72 Olympic Games, you were there, and probably our first ever taste of terrorism.
Yeah, it was shocking. And I was right there, Johnny, on the spot, and it's all in the book. My late wife and I arrived on the morning of about 9 o'clock in the morning, and Nairi had tickets to go to the volleyball, and we went there, and they said it's closed down.
You're with the Auckland Star at this stage?
That's right,
yeah.
And they said it's closed down for the day. What's going on? They said there's been trouble over at the Games Village, so we wandered over there. There's a 10-foot high fence, and they lined up 3 deep. You wouldn't believe it. And it's like spectators at a Roman Colosseum. And I looked in, and there was a dead Israeli lying in a pool of blood about 50 metres from where we were standing. And it's a real surreal situation. They were selling ice creams to all the people lined up along the fence. And there's a famous photo of one of the terrorists, the PLO guys, with a submachine gun with a balaclava on. You might have recorded it. Yeah. And he was standing on a balcony only about 70 metres from us, and facing off against a couple of German, like equivalent of our SAS snipers. And that was all on for about 12 hours.
You wouldn't have known, no one was really aware of terrorism in those days,
That's
were
right,
they?
no,
You know,
no.
Especially at an event.
That's right. That's
shocking, wasn't it?
Eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Terrible.
72 was also a colourful year for you because you ended up going on the All Black tour.
That's right, yes.
Which is probably one of the most infamous tours the All Blacks have ever taken.
Yes.
But you say in your bio, I'm not really going to recount too much about the Keith Murdoch affair because it's a bloody good read, so you've got to buy the book to read that. But you recount then how, and I suppose you look at how things have changed now. There was a code of ethics amongst the journos and the players and the team in those days, wasn't there?
Pretty much so, yes.
You knew what to report and what not to report, and there was a bond and trust. That's gone now, hasn't it?
Well,
it's open season.
Pretty much so. But I was fortunate because I think I had, dare I say it, more respect from the players than most of the journos because I'd competed at international at a very high level. And every morning I go out and do my workouts while while the All Blacks were practicing. In fact, they called me in on a couple of occasions to play touch with them.
Yeah, I remember you saying in the book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
yeah. So the Murdoch thing, I mean, I'm not going to blow his cover because it's superbly written because he happened to be right there. I mean, that is freakish to be right there.
Yep.
But you were there. Read the book because it's got that in it.
Right.
But I think back, the tour was a disaster from go to woe. Was that management? What was it? I mean, Duffer was the coach, Bob Duff.
Dare I say it, a lot of it sheeted back to dear old Ernie Todd.
Yeah.
Because nobody knew at the time he had cancer, and he should never have been named the manager of the team.
He wasn't up for it, was he?
No, he wasn't. But he's a lovely guy.
Yeah.
But he died only several months after he got back to New Zealand, so he must have been in pretty bad shape.
The thing in the book which I find interesting about that whole affair is, even to today, a lot of those players regret the lack of action that they took as a team.
That's
and
right.
It was because it was sort of bullied on them, wasn't it?
Well, it was. It was forced on him, and Kirky, to this day, will tell you.
I've spoken with him, yeah.
Yeah, and he said it's the biggest regret in his life that they didn't stand up to the IRB, international. It wasn't the rugby union. I think they put the pressure on, and I think the guy that got king hit by Keith with the punch, Peter Grant, he threatened to take legal action against Keith, and it would have gone to the courts, etc. So that was another influencing
But
factor.
it was the Beret tour and the Mafia tour, and it just wasn't really an All Black tour, standards-wise, was it?
That's right, and but again, you know, you've got to cheat it back to dear old Ernie.
Dear right.
And I hate to say that, but the other factor was that they, compared with today, it was absolutely pathetic, and I've written a whole chapter called Rugby in the Dark Ages, and I allude to it there. You know, they didn't have a physiotherapist. There's a 32-match tour from memory. They played 3 times a week, Saturday, Wednesday, Wednesday, Saturday. Didn't have a physiotherapist. They didn't have a...
Not a huge squad either for that workload.
30 players, yeah. And
then you, as we've moved on, I mean, I still think, you know, good Canterbury and the late Russ Thomas, you know. I remember him coming back in '78 to saying we would never march 10 metres in the entire tour.
Yes.
That was the thing that he was a stickler for, was discipline.
Discipline.
They grew a lot. Did they learn a lot out of '72, do you think?
Probably, yes. I think they sharpened up a little bit, but it's not until what we call now the professional era that it's really got super professional. There's a story in there about Tane Norton's Achilles tendon.
Yeah.
I asked the guy, because I'd had Achilles tendon 10 years before.
You knew what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I asked the baggage guy, little guy is 21, Graham Short, if he had any tape in this. He said, what do you want it for? To tape Tane's Achilles tendon to just help him through the pain. And he said, gave me a roll out of his little first aid kit like that. And he said, now try not to use it all because it costs $2.60 a roll. I said, give me a break, mate, give me a break. I said, I was at the University of Southern California 10 years ago. The football team had a 10-match season. They had 10 coaches and 5 extra backups. And I said, do you know what their budget was for tape for the football team for one season? He said, no. I said, $50,000, and you'll be grudging me 2 and 6pence for a roll of tape? I said, get a life. It just blew me away.
Do you like the concept of a World Cup for rugby?
Yes, I do. I know Andy Hayden has had a lot of criticism over the years, and some are justifiably so. But Andy was one of the first to initiate what he saw as a world championship. And I think, well, most other sports have world championships and World Cups, so why not?
But of course, the IRB then took it over, didn't they?
It
was our idea.
That's right.
But then suddenly they wanted ownership, and I don't know whether that's really helped it too much, but never mind. Just very, very briefly, you're 80 years of age. What have you got left to achieve? What do you want to do? What's your bucket list?
Well, I want to live to 81 if I can.
Yeah, that's a start. Yeah.
But I'm still training 3 to 4 times a week. I went out for a run yesterday. I never had any stamina. What I do, I stride a 50 metres, walk back 50, and do that for half an hour and get a good sweat up and get my pulse up to about 130.
So have you got a project?
Pardon?
Have you got a project you want to do?
Well, I want to get over this one because I might have to take a year off to become sane again.
Well, the book is available. We have one copy. It's signed by Roy. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a gentleman in the studio, I've got to say, compared to some of them. And fascinating life and times. Make sure you buy it, any good bookstore, but 3777033. Register with Mary Ann. We'll give one away next week. Thanks, Roy, very much for your company. Hope you've enjoyed it there. We'll catch you another Red and Black Sport next week.